Imagine driving home after a quiet evening with family, only to come face to face with reckless danger on a dark stretch of road. Now, picture discovering that the very people causing the chaos are those meant to protect you. This is the reality Richard Thompson, a retired police chief, faced when two officers, intoxicated and brazen, turned a routine drive into a brutal assault. They had no clue that the man they belittled and left injured was once their superior, a man who had dedicated his life to the badge they so recklessly tarnished. If you're ready to uncover how this tale of survival became a symbol for justice and change, subscribe to our channel now and be the first to dive into stories that reveal the truth behind the badge. On what seemed like an ordinary night, Richard Thompson, a 75-year-old man who had lived through countless experiences, was driving back home after a pleasant visit to his son. The road looked like it always did, but a retired police chief's heart never really stops searching for the unexpected. Out of nowhere, a car shot down the wrong side, barreling toward him as if the world had tossed every rule aside. Thompson, with a reflex born of experience, swerved just in time, feeling his pulse pound against his chest. Haven't we all felt that rush when danger catches us off guard, leaving us breathless? He could only wonder who was behind the wheel, driving so recklessly, ignoring the safety of others. As Thompson steadied himself and the shock began to settle, his instinct pulled him to take action. After all, he'd spent years enforcing the law, seeing lives change, or end, because of foolish choices on the road. As he followed the reckless car, he couldn't help but think, after all these years, is it still my duty to chase these things down? Just an old man now, with a spine full of aches, but once a protector, always a protector, right? He didn't hesitate. It didn't matter that retirement had come and gone 2 decades ago. Some duties never end. His mind churned over the kind of person who'd drive so recklessly. Perhaps it was some teenager with too much confidence and too little experience. Or maybe it was someone who simply didn't care. Either way, Thompson's sense of duty was unshakable, driving him forward, every fiber of his being unwilling to let this incident slide. He finally caught up, signaling for the driver to pull over. As he did, his hands felt the weight of decades of dedication to justice. There's something sobering about facing danger at 75 years old, knowing you're no longer in your prime, yet still feeling that familiar fire within. It's a fire that doesn't fade, no matter the years. He didn't yet know who was behind that wheel, or what this encounter would demand of him. He only knew that justice, as he'd always known it, was about to take a turn he hadn't seen coming. When Thompson finally managed to pull the reckless driver over, he stepped out of his car, a mix of irritation and relief on his face. But as he approached, he couldn't believe what he saw. There, slumped in the driver's seat and barely able to keep their eyes open, were 2 police officers, clearly intoxicated and wholly indifferent to the trouble they had caused. Thompson's jaw tightened, but he took a deep breath, attempting to approach them calmly. "Gentlemen, you nearly caused a serious accident back there. Mind explaining yourselves?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. They looked at him with a blend of contempt and arrogance, a smirk playing on one of their faces. It was the type of look that said, "Who does this old guy think he is?" One of the officers staggered out of the car, sneering, "What's it to you, old man? Go home before you hurt yourself." Thompson could hardly believe the audacity. After all his years in service, he knew arrogance when he saw it. But this was something different, a level of disregard he'd seldom encountered, even among criminals. They have no idea who they're talking to, he thought, a hint of amusement mixed with a newfound frustration. Still, he maintained his composure. "I may be old, but I don't miss much," he replied, his tone sharp. "Now I'm going to need you both to hand over your badges." That comment, however, only fueled their aggression. As the seconds passed, the air grew thicker with tension. The second officer, slurring his words, took a step closer, chuckling in a mocking tone. "Who do you think you are? Grandpa's lost in the past." Thompson felt his blood simmer, but held his ground, his gaze steady. He knew it was risky, but he wasn't one to back down, not even in the face of such blatant disrespect. These men, blinded by their inebriation and arrogance, were clueless about the legacy standing before them. But the disdain in their voices was just the beginning of a night that would push Thompson's resolve to its very limit. In an instant, the situation took a dark and unexpected turn. Before Thompson could react, one of the officers grabbed him by the collar, shoving him back with a force that sent him staggering. His body, aged but resilient, struggled to stay upright as he caught his breath. He'd faced criminals with cold eyes and callous intentions, but this was different. This was coming from men sworn to uphold the same code he had once honored. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Not so tough now, are you?" one officer sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Thompson's mind raced, flashes of his years of service mixing with the sharp reality of his helplessness in this moment. As they continued, one officer slammed him against his car, the impact sending a jolt of pain through his spine. Yet, he held his head high, refusing to show fear. In his mind, he reminded himself, "They don't know who I am, but I know what I stand for." The second officer, fueled by alcohol and a twisted sense of power, struck him, sending him to the ground. They laughed as they continued their assault, oblivious to the integrity and years of honor embodied by the man they were humiliating. They ripped his jacket, kicked his legs, and left his car dented and shattered, a fitting reflection of the disregard they held for the values they were meant to uphold. Thompson lay on the ground, pain searing through every inch of his body, yet a fierce resolve burned within him. He felt the weight of humiliation, of being stripped of dignity by those who should have been his brothers in arms. But even as they drove off, leaving him bruised and broken on the roadside, his mind refused to accept defeat. Every ache in his body reminded him of the strength he'd carried through his life, the battles fought for a cause greater than himself. And with that, a spark of determination lit up within him. He knew, as he struggled to stand, that this wouldn't end here. This wasn't just his fight. It was a fight for everyone who still believed in justice. Lying on the cold ground, battered and bruised, Thompson felt every muscle in his body screaming in pain. But amid the agony, there was something even stronger, a fierce determination, a will to survive. He wasn't ready to give in. He had a purpose to fulfill, and he wasn't about to let two corrupt officers take that from him. Slowly, with sheer grit, he managed to get on his feet. Each step felt like fire, but he whispered to himself, "I've fought tougher battles than this. They think they've left me broken, but they don't know who they're dealing with." The thought steeled his resolve, igniting a spark of defiance in his heart. He staggered forward, one painful step at a time, the road back to town stretching endlessly before him. As he moved, memories flooded his mind. Cases he'd solved, lives he'd saved, the friends he'd lost along the way. This wasn't the way it was supposed to end. No, not for him, and certainly not like this. He wasn't just surviving for himself. He was pushing forward for every good officer who dedicated their life to the badge with integrity and honor. Every step, every painful breath was a testament to the strength of his spirit. "If I can just get back. If I can make it to town." The mantra echoed in his head, drowning out the pain, keeping him focused. His purpose gave him strength, far beyond what his aged body alone could muster. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity, but finally, the town lights appeared on the horizon. With renewed determination, Thompson made his way to the nearest hospital, where he knew he could get the help he needed. The physical toll was heavy, but his spirit remained unbroken. His mind was clear, his goal unwavering. Those men would be brought to justice. This was no longer just about his pain. It was a stand for the values he'd lived by. As the doctors tended to his wounds, he made a silent vow. He'd see this through, no matter what it took. And as dawn broke, so did a new chapter in his life, one where his fight for justice was only beginning. After hours of rest and medical attention, Thompson emerged from the hospital with renewed strength and a clear mission. Justice would be served. His mind was focused, his body still aching but ready. He reached out to former colleagues, officers he had mentored, officers who shared his commitment to integrity. They were shocked to hear what had happened, their disbelief quickly turning to outrage. "They think they can get away with this? Not on my watch," said one of his old partners, clenching his fists. Thompson nodded, a glint in his eye. They all knew that bringing down bad cops wasn't just about one incident. It was about restoring faith in the force itself. Together, they devised a plan. Thompson's team worked with precision, tracking down the rogue officers with quiet, determined efficiency. As he prepared for the confrontation, Thompson couldn't help but feel a mix of sorrow and resolve. This is what it's come to? Fighting our own? But if we let them continue, they'll only tarnish what we've all stood for, he thought. When they finally caught up with the officers, Thompson stepped forward, facing them directly. "Gentlemen, you've violated everything that badge represents. You're under arrest," he stated, his voice steady, leaving no room for defiance. The officers, still in shock, stood frozen, as though they couldn't believe the reckoning had come so swiftly. The arrest was swift but symbolic. Thompson knew that this confrontation was more than just about himself. It was about sending a message. His old colleagues watched with pride, some even cheering as the rogue officers were led away in cuffs. "It's a reminder," Thompson thought, looking at his fellow officers, "that integrity can't be compromised, not even for one night of recklessness." In that moment, he wasn't just an old man seeking justice. He was a beacon of accountability, proof that the true measure of a police officer lies in their commitment to honor and service. And as he watched the officers get into the patrol car, he knew this was a victory not just for him, but for the force as a whole, a stand for integrity that would echo far beyond that single arrest. In the days that followed, Thompson's story spread throughout the department, the town, and beyond. It wasn't just the tale of an old man's bravery. It became a symbol, a call to action against the deeper issues of systemic abuse and misconduct. Thompson stood before his community, speaking with a fire in his voice that many thought had faded with retirement. "This isn't just about two bad officers," he began, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. "This is about every single one of us who wears the badge. We can't allow a few to tarnish what it truly means to serve." His words struck a chord, a reminder that integrity was not just a personal commitment, but a collective responsibility. It wasn't the speech of a victim, but of a leader calling for change. Thompson wasn't content with just letting the incident slide into the annals of small-town history. He reached out to local officials, initiating programs aimed at fostering accountability and trust within the force. He wanted more than promises. He demanded action. He called for officers to regularly undergo training on ethical conduct and community relations, his voice echoing with a determination that was hard to ignore. "We can't be divided by the badge. We have to be united by it," he would say in meetings, his gaze unwavering. He knew that change wouldn't come overnight, but he also knew that seeds of transformation had been planted. Thompson's story became more than a tale of survival. It became a rallying cry. His determination inspired others in the force, challenging them to reflect on their roles and their values. Officers, young and old, started looking to him as a symbol of what the badge truly meant. And while he'd once thought his days of influence were behind him, Thompson now realized that perhaps his most significant contribution was just beginning. "Change starts with us," he would tell anyone who asked why he hadn't just let it go. And with that, he left an indelible mark on a department and a community, reminding them that true justice is not just served, it's earned every single day. Moral of the story: Thompson's journey isn't just about one man seeking justice. It's a reminder of the power of resilience, integrity, and accountability, even when the odds seem insurmountable. His story raises powerful questions about how far one must go to stand up for what's right, especially when those responsible for protecting others cross the line. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to fight for justice, even against those you once trusted? What would you do if faced with a betrayal this deep? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on this powerful story. And if this kind of content resonates with you, click on the next video to dive deeper into real stories that inspire and challenge the way we view justice. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay connected and never miss our latest updates.